Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you to my channel. Hello plant lovers, and thanks for joining me. If it's your first time, I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne. I sometimes do divert into warm ones, which I really shouldn't. Anyway, I grow them without any sort of additional help, let's say. So no greenhouses or humidifiers or grow lights, etc. They're either indoors or outdoors or they're out of the pool. So if that's your bag, do hit subscribe. I post every week. I'm a complete amateur and my ramblings and journeys may be of no use to you, but it amuses me. And today, look at this little beauty. Ta-da! My very first Maxillaria to bloom. I'm very pleased about that. Although, we'll get to that. But anyway, plant lovers, here we are, Maxillaria. I have got... How many Maxillaria have I got? I've only got one other. I've got tenuifolia, which hasn't bloomed. But anyway, this one certainly has. And this one, ladies and gentlemen, is... Can I dare to pronounce that? Porphyrostele? Porphyrostele? Porphyrostele. Anyway, forgive me, I can't pronounce Latin. Anyway, Maxillaria, interestingly, comes from Latin maxilla, which means jaw, because apparently someone thought that some of these flowers look like jawbones, but there you go. That's those crazy botanists for you. I don't see a jaw-like tendency at all. Anyway, now this one is a native of Brazil and it is an epiphyte, as many orchids are, and it's described as a cool to hot grower, which I always find amazing that a plant can be that adaptable. And here in Melbourne, I am reliably informed that it can also go sort of, let's just say, on that colder spectrum. So I grow this outdoors. It's undercover, it's protected, but it nonetheless gets winter minimums at night, which can get down to, in the worst case scenario, 1, 2, 3 degrees Celsius. So between, you know, sort of 34 degrees to, I guess, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, pretty chilly. But anyway, this seems fine. So I would say if you're in an area where it doesn't freeze, this could be an orchid for you outdoors all year. Obviously, this is an orchid that doesn't like strong light. It likes dappled light and on the shadier side of the spectrum, but nonetheless, outdoors it can live. And mine has. And this is a species orchid, so it is as it occurs in the wild. And the flowers are sort of a greeny yellow with this most beautiful, really bright red. Well, it's sort of like a burgundy interior to the flower. It's really a very, very pretty flower. The negatives for me, though, are that it firstly curves down, and secondly, the flowers don't open more than this. So you kind of think, oh, they're about to open more. No. So it's kind of demure. It's an orchid you've got to get close to. The plus is, though, this was a division that I bought, and it is a pretty fast spreader, so it can clump and make a specimen quite readily. So if you imagine you've got quite a big plant and you'll have maybe 10 blooms, it will look pretty amazing and spectacular in the flowering season, which is, for me, right now, it is very early spring and the flowers are in their full bloom. We've got these quite fat pseudobulbs, and the flower spike comes from just below the soil surface, from the base of the pseudobulb. And I'm not sure, because I haven't actually poked about to see if each pseudobulb is capable of producing more than one bloom. I'm not sure. I would imagine it's one bloom per bulb, but who knows. I also don't know if an old bulb can bloom again. I probably think not, because that is often the case, but don't take my word for that. You can correct me, I'm sure. So what that means, though, as ever, is promoting good vegetative growth, which just means giving it the right kind of care. Now, this is an epiphyte, as many orchids are, so I have got this in a loose, free-draining medium, and my medium is medium-sized bark pieces with a bit of charcoal, a bit of perlite, a little bit of shell grit, just because I love it, and shell grit is full of calcium, which orchids like. I also include a couple of grains of a slow-release general fertilizer and mycorrhizal fungi, which promotes healthy root growth and enables the plant to extract nutrients, including the calcium from the shell grit. And healthy roots equal a healthy plant, particularly with orchids. Now, the other thing this orchid is supposed to be famous for, plant lovers, is its fragrance. Now, yes, if you get your nose right into it, you can smell vanilla, and it is actually, it's a really beautiful vanilla. But it's not a fragrance you're going to smell walking past an orchid. You're really going to have to get your head into it. Maybe, obviously, as it grows into a bigger specimen and you have more flowers, you're going to have more fragrance. But anyway, it's lovely, but it's not earth-shattering. Watering, I tend to a little often, if that makes sense, and I obviously dial it down in winter and I dial it up in summer. It tends to be on the drier side rather than the damper side, but I don't let this one dry out completely. Mind you, it's got a reasonably sized pseudobulb, so it can store a bit of water, so it's pretty tough and tenacious. I wouldn't worry that much about it, but of course the thing is, don't overwater any orchids. It's the easiest way to kill them. Being a Brazilian, it does love humidity. I think most Maxillarias do. So I give it a good spray, basically once a day. It's part of my morning ritual to go and spray everything. And obviously the pot assists with the humidity, and in hot weather I kind of splosh water about, so it creates ambient humidity. And Melbourne has a fairly high ambient humidity anyway, so we're not a particularly dry climate, but it's certainly not Brazilian humid. So yeah, I spray this most mornings. And as you can see, terracotta pot kind of guy. I think particularly great for epiphytes. So terracotta assists in the free draining. It evaporates water really quickly, so it adds to the humidity around the plant. But in summer, it does mean it can evaporate really quickly. If it's a hot day or hot and windy, you might find it dries out really quickly. So keep your eye on plants in terracotta in summer. And really, watering is a little bit common sense. If the ambient temperature is warmer and windy particularly, it can dry out faster, and if it's colder and less sunny, it won't. So in winter, dial it down, in summer, dial it up, but just observe, just get a sense of how dry the medium is, sort of a good knuckle depth down to see how the plant is faring. Other than that, fertilizing wise, I fertilize most of my orchids throughout the warmer season with a diluted solution of whatever orchid mix I feel at the time, and that could be a seaweed-based solution diluted to about 1/8 of the recommended dose, or it can be an orchid-specific soluble fertilizer. Again, I always reduce the recommended dose by at least 1/8 because I find it's very easy to overfeed potted plants and it's not good for them necessarily. Other than that, this one is really simple. It's in a fairly shady spot. It gets quite bright indirect morning light and then reasonable shade in the afternoon. It gets a little bit of dappled morning light. Other than that, it's on the shadier side of the spectrum. And the flowers are really quite pretty. I'm looking forward to it being a bigger specimen so I get more flowers, but I'm really pleased. This is the first year it's bloomed for me and the first time I flowered a Maxillaria. So I want my tenuifolia to flower. It's a very healthy looking plant, but so far, no luck. And I have smelt those in full flight and they are amazing. But this one, oh, you are beautiful. I shouldn't disparage your fragrance. There we are, plant lovers. Maxillaria, and I can't pronounce this, porphyrostele. Now porphyry is that beautiful sort of purpley stone that was used a lot in Egyptian carving. I wonder why it has that name. Anyway, who knows on the name, but I am very pleased with it. So there we go. Plant lovers, thank you for watching. Thank you for finding me. I do post every week, so hit subscribe if you want to follow my continuing and very amateur adventures with orchids here in Melbourne. And Maxillaria and I look forward to seeing you next week for another adventure.